magazine, I got really excited because it's the annual work issue. So that means it's full of articles about work and workplaces. So I always enjoy that one for obvious reasons. So then I open it, I see the table of contents, and here is the headline of one of the articles. What Google learned from its quest to build the perfect team. Subtitle, New Research Reveals Surprising Truths about why some groups thrive and others falter. Okay, I have to admit, my heart sank. What? What kind of reaction is that to a kind of a fun and now famous article? Well, here's the problem. At that time, I'm considered something of a teams expert, and I've just been scooped by Google. And so this is not a great way to start the day. And worse than that, I look at it and it's a really long article and it's Sunday morning, and I'm pretty sure my colleagues at Harvard will expect me to have read this by tomorrow, right? So I'm not feeling all that excited. But I start reading because, what did they find out? What's the secret sauce? And I suppose the silver lining here is that Charles Duhigg, who wrote the article, is a very compelling writer. So it's full of suspense, right? And there's twists and turns, and there's the things they tried that did not work, gender mix, you name it. They tried everything. And nothing seemed to be doing a good job of statistically predicting team performance until Julia Rosofsky and her colleagues encountered the concept of psychological safety. In academic papers, I'm just saying, not a bad place to look. And then it was, Duhigg writes, as if everything suddenly fell into place. Okay, I admit emphasis added. That was not in the original. But you see, to me, it's not every day that I read in the New York Times that my research has made everything fall into place at Google. Not every day at all. And indeed, if you, in the online version I checked, you could click through there and get to my original research paper that said this very thing, right? but in a different context, in a manufacturing context. So I'm feeling a little better. Until, that is, I noticed and thought about, contemplated the date. So it's February 25th, 2016. The paper in question, which I hasten to add was well cited by academics, had been published in 1999. Okay? So that's 17 years waiting for relevance. That is a long time. And my husband, who's a bench scientist, had gone from bench to bedside with actually a cure for a certain type of cancer in a decade. So I'm deflated again, right? This is really not a great track record for an academic. So, but here's just, this I believe put psychological safety on the map. People started paying attention, not because of the Administrative Science Quarterly paper by Amy Edginson, but because of the New York Times article by Charles Duhigg and Julia Rosofsky and her colleagues' research. So to which I say thank you, Google. But now, here's, I think, our assignment for this afternoon. It's to understand why, in a very deep way, why this was the case. Why would psychological safety be the thing that predicts team performance at Google? So we're going to keep that in mind. And now we're going to back up, and I'm going to say we have to set the stage. So here's the stage. You already know this, right? We are living in a VUCA world. This is an old term coined by the U.S. Army War College, a short way of saying it's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous out there. But here's my question to you, which is, what if you took it seriously? How would you show up? How would you have to be at work? How would you have to be as a leader if you truly understood you were leading in a VUCA world? Well, at least two things immediately come to mind. Number one, anyone's voice could make a crucial difference at an unexpected time. And number two, things will go wrong, right? Like it or not, things will go wrong in our VUCA world. Okay, fine. So as a leader, you gotta make sure that both of those things are okay because they're real, they're reality. But here's part of the challenge. Psychologically, we humans, I don't care where you work, none of us love to wake up in the morning and jump out of bed because we simply cannot wait to get to work today. To look ignorant, incompetent, intrusive, or negative, right? most of us would like to look smart, capable, helpful, and positive. And so we are hardwired, socialized, a little of both, to reduce the interpersonal risk. And if you don't want to look ignorant, just don't ask questions. If you don't want to look incompetent, don't admit mistakes. Don't offer ideas that might be dumb or not well received by the higher ups, and certainly don't critique the status quo, because you know who created it? They did. So the intuition I want you to have is simply this: holding back is second nature. People don't hold back their ideas, their questions, their concerns at work because they're weird or because it's toxic or broken. They hold back because it's normal and natural to do so, especially in a hierarchy, and frankly, there's hierarchies everywhere. So if you don't believe me, I'm going to take you on a little field trip to my favorite scholarly journal, The New Yorker. And now I know it's not really a scholarly journal, but here is a cartoon at 60 years old, somewhat timeless, if you ask me. I know there's some things we need to modernize here, but this was literally published in '72. And if you bear with me for a moment, I'm going to claim that there are three, not one, but three social science findings, robust findings, that are mocked in this one cartoon. Number one, people don't like to disagree with the boss. That turns out to be about the oldest finding in my field. People just don't. Bad news doesn't travel up. We don't like to disagree with the boss. But what we see here, especially for those of you in the back, is we've got, I'm pretty sure it's a top management team, right? Because of the way they're dressed. And what we have is the boss saying, all those in favor say aye. Because it's a top management team, we don't know much about the situation, but we're pretty sure this is strategic, right? And around the table, to a man, aye, right? Yes, boss. But check out the thought bubbles. Right? You know, they're going from say it ain't so to no, 1,000 times no. Think about it. You got 1,000 no's inside your head, and you won't release just one, for the good of the company. We recognize this. Okay, so old finding. It's, people don't disagree with the boss. Social science finding number two, check out the smile on the boss's face. Right? It turns out, I don't know that we needed research on this, but there is research on this. We like it better when people agree with us. No. It gets worse. We think they're smarter, okay? Right? I mean, there's something wrong with the species, right? Because we really should think they're smarter if they bring something new and different. But instead, I like you and you're smart. And social science finding number three, you know it, I know it, homogeneity is a risk factor. But let's go back here. Top team, lot at stake, strategic decision. What is wrong with these people? Right? Do they not care? Right? Are they not committed? I don't think that's the explanation. So what is the explanation? Let's put ourselves in their shoes, right? One of them, any one of them. The you've got to be kidding guy, right? So this moment when the boss asks, all those in favor say aye, and you have a choice to make. You could speak up. And if you do, who gains? Well, the team, the organization, maybe the customer. And how confident are you that that gain will occur? Not very, right? And when, if it were to occur, would it occur? Well, later. Now, let's say instead you hold back. Who gains? You do, right? 100%. Nobody ever got fired for silence. And how confident should you be in that gain? 100%, and you have it right now. So, the intuition here is that speaking up feels psychologically costly, which can be silly, but it's true, and holding back is absolutely cost-free. It's just easy and simple. So you must realize, as a leader at any level, that the tacit calculus, the sort of automatic reasoning that goes on inside people's heads, leans strong towards silence. I'm not saying it's always silence, of course not. But I am saying it's a little bit overpowered. So, what's your job? Shift the calculus, right? It's just math. We're going to have to shift the calculus, because otherwise this is just how things naturally unfold. Now, I said VUCA, right? We're in an uncertain world, and your success, all of your success, your team's success, your company's success, depends on the ability to make high quality bets. That's what they were not doing in that cartoon. So, and by the way, if you don't like the word bets, you can use decisions. But make no mistake, they're bets. Now, where do these come from? Well, they come from high quality conversations, which that was not, right? And they don't happen by accident, right? So they need psychological safety, right? That's part of, not all of it, but that's part of the program here. That is why we have to, like it or not, care about psychological safety. I don't care what industry you're in. So what is it exactly? You probably know this, but you may not. There's lots of misconceptions ever since Google. My definition is that it is a belief that the environment, the work environment, is safe for interpersonal risk, that you can speak up with wacky ideas, questions, concerns, mistakes. Not that it will be easy or fun or even comfortable, but that you believe it's expected. It's what we do around here, right? It's a sense of permission for candor. Okay, so I said misconceptions. Many of them. Here are 4 of my, I never know whether to say favorite or least favorite, but whatever. The most important ones to dispel. Number 1, psychological safety is not about being nice. It's not about feeling comfortable. Right? Learning is uncomfortable, isn't it? It's supposed to be. It's not a guarantee will be instantly implemented. And too many people say, well, they have someone in their team say, you didn't agree with my idea in that meeting, so you took away my psychological safety. You say, oh, no, please, no, that's not it. And it's not feeling comfortable, as I said, it's not lowering standards. When I first started talking about the research way back when, especially to sort of physicians and others in high-risk settings, they'd say, well, okay, I get it, and we're all about learning, but are you saying I have to dial down the performance standards? And I'm saying, no, that's actually not what I'm saying. In fact, I am a huge proponent of high standards. Let me illustrate. I think you as leaders, as clinicians, really all of us, are responsible for 2 dimensions. One is psychological safety, and the other is performance standards. It would be a whole other talk to say, but you know this stuff. How do you motivate people to care, to work hard? I don't think those cartoon men had a motivation problem. I think they had a fear problem. And so if you don't do a good job, if it's low, well, we can call that the apathy zone. This is where people quit and stay, frankly. Too many people, they hear the concept, I get it, it's the term, we won't go there, but they think you're talking about the comfort zone. Let it all hang out. No. Actually, not talking about the comfort zone. And the one that worries me, the one that keeps me up at night, is what I call the anxiety zone. This is not anxiety about the deadline or anxiety about a virus or a competitor or anything else. It's anxiety about interpersonal risk, right? If you are anxious about the quality of the work, that's good because you can talk about it, right? It's the fear that is shared is fine. We can use it to motivate us. But the fear that is private is quite dangerous. So high, this is where we're going. We need to be in the learning zone. The learning zone, so long as you're in a VUCA world, meaning as long as there's uncertainty and interdependence, the learning zone and the high performance zone are one and the same. That's where we need to be. So we'll talk about how do we get there. But just to relabel the axes here, the vertical is kind of a sense of felt permission for candor, and the horizontal is a sense of deep felt accountability for doing our best. Now, there's one more misconception. Too many organizations, great people like you have said, okay, they invite me and they say, our goal is psychological safety. I say, no, it's not. I say, what? What are you talking about? I say, no, that's not your goal. Tell me what your goal is. Is it innovation? Is it market share? Is it excellence in highly dangerous settings? Tell me what your goal is, and I will tell you how psychological safety is on the path toward that goal. But do not tell me that your goal is psychological safety, because that's going to be inauthentic at best. And so I I set a variety of goals. How about quality improvement? Right? Many places, including healthcare, have that as a goal. So I had the chance to study 23 intensive care units in North America 20 years ago. They were all actively engaged in quality improvement work, so we got in there. By then, I had a validated survey measure that I imagine many of you have seen about psychological safety. So the very first result that jumps off the page at us is this. These are statistically significant differences. This is essentially of the 1,100 clinicians in our survey. We did interviews, we did observation, we did a survey. We did everything we could to try to find out, why do some quality improvement projects take hold and actually create improvement and others don't? Along the way, we have this result. And what it says is, and forgive me for this, but the higher you are in the status hierarchy in this context, the more you believe your voice is welcome. Are you surprised? No. Nobody's surprised. No, I admit Ingrid and I did this study together. We're not surprised either. This was hypothesis one. Okay, but here's what did surprise us. We looked carefully at the data, as one does, unit by unit, meaning hospital by hospital, and what we found was in some of them, fewer than half, but in some of them, it did not matter what role you had, physician, nurse, respiratory therapist, you had the same exact level of psychological safety, no statistical differences. So it was flat and high, as it turns out, which means that in slightly more than half of these units, the pattern is steeper than what we see here. Okay, that we didn't expect. So 2 questions immediately come to mind, right? Question 1, does it matter? And the answer to question 1 is a resounding yes. So 3 years into this study, those with the flat-high pattern had an 18% improvement in morbidity and mortality compared to their counterparts. Lives saved, harm averted. Question 2, which I won't answer right now, but I will answer soon, is what explains the difference? Now, it wasn't resources, it wasn't academic standing, it wasn't anything but what I'll just right now call local leadership, frontline leadership on the part of medical directors. I will tell you more about what they did as I unravel what it is all of you need to do and help others do more of. But what about innovation? Right, another valid goal. Here's a study that I did with Henrik Bressman at INSEAD. We studied 62 innovation teams in the pharma sector. We asked, pretty simple question, which teams do you expect to have greater innovation success? Right, those, option A, with more diverse scientific and other expertise, or option B, those with more homogeneous expertise. Let's just have a quick show of hands for A. Popular choice. And B? Not at all popular, but not unheard of. Orange over there, we'll talk. Okay, turns out you're the only one in the room, maybe I missed some, who got it right. So no, I'm just kidding, right? So bear with me for just a moment, right? But all factors being equal, the more diverse expert teams underperformed their counterparts. Say what? That goes in the face of everything we know about innovation, so don't worry. At least some of you are already thinking, Amy, don't show me a regression line. Show me a scatter plot, and I will. Aha! And now the plot thickens, right? Or clarifies, I think. So what we see here is indeed, as nearly all of you anticipated, only the more diverse teams hit it out of the park, right? Really breakthrough performance, maybe a couple of the others. But an awful lot of them did not. They had what we euphemistically call disappointing performance. So what if I turned the dots red if they had 1 standard deviation higher psychological safety than the mean? Do that. And lo and behold, we get a fuller story. So now we know what we knew already, which is that teams with diverse talents have more potential. And that potential is not theirs for the asking. They actually have to access it. And in this case, psychological safety appears to be I'm not saying the only, but an unlock, right? It's part of what allowed them to access their diverse expertise. So, quality improvement. Innovation, all things that psychological safety can unlock. Stuart Bunderson at Washington University in St. Louis did a few years back, it's called a meta-analysis, where he and his student Brett Center looked at all of the then peer-reviewed articles that had measures of psychological safety and team performance to see what they could find by pooling those all together. And what did they find? They found that overall, across the data, psychological safety was a consistent, just like Google found later, a consistent predictor of performance. But now here's the elegant result. Here's why I share this. This doesn't speak to you yet, probably. But what they found was that psychological safety, yes, it always predicts team performance, doesn't matter where you are, but the extent to which the work is more knowledge intensive, more in need of learning to get results, then what's called the effect size is larger. Right? So psychological safety always matters, but the more uncertainty there is, the more problem solving is needed, the more collaboration is needed, the more it matters. Right? So this is a long-winded way of saying context matters. In other words, some of you are more in need of ensuring you get this right than others, but it matters for everyone. So when I say context, I'm a simple thinker. So I cluster it into three categories, archetypes, if you will. There are consistent contexts, which are the only ones where, and they're fantastic because that's usually where the profits come from, but they're the only ones where we really do have a clear line of sight. Right? You can stand there with a stopwatch and know what's going to happen 57 seconds from now. Right? And those are where the knowledge for how to get the result we want is extremely well developed, well honed, and predictable. Then we have, for most of us work, frankly, what's called variable settings, where we have mature and expert knowledge about how to get certain results that we want, and every day is different, or every case is different, every consulting assignment is different, every patient is different, right? So these are the contexts, again, where most of us work, where we bring our knowledge, but we have to remain ever vigilant and ever curious, and we're trying to figure out what's happening here so that we can use our knowledge as best we can. Now we keep going to the right, and we get to novel, where right now we don't have a clue how to get the result that we dearly want, cure this cancer, what have you. So why does this matter? Because as you go to the right, like it or not, uncertainty goes up. Right? So the need for psychological safety to take the kinds of risks you have to take will go up. Although again, don't forget, it matters everywhere. What else goes up? Failures. Right? We don't like to talk about it, but it's true. Failures go up as we go to the right. But not all failures are alike. Right? So some failures really bring us new information we couldn't have gotten any other way. Other failures are largely preventable, and when we're at our best, we prevent them. Right? So we don't have to learn to love all failure. We have to learn from all failures, but we don't have to learn to love them all. Let me be clear about this, right? So they correlate with the context, but it's not a perfect match for reasons we can get into if you want. So there is a kind of failure, I gave it the name basic failure, where we do have the knowledge about how to get the result we want, but generally a mistake, a single, simple cause, leads us to a failure that could be large, that could be small. It could be a plane crash, it could be a trip on the sidewalk. So it's not size, that's how we distinguish, it's type. Right? And I think it's clear, well, I'll just say it anyway, we want to prevent these. Okay, so number two, complex failures. These are multi-causal. These are the failures that happen in healthcare. They call them Swiss cheese failures, that multiple factors come together in just the wrong way, any one of which on its own would not lead to a failure, but they combine. Supply chain breakdown in the midst of a global pandemic, for example. Right? So complex failures also, when we're at our best, when our systems are up and running, we can prevent most of them. We're kind of in the catch and correct business, every one of us. Now let's draw a line in the sand, because now we get to the third kind, and these I call them intelligent failures. And they are, just ask any scientist, the still undesired results of thoughtful forays into new territory. These failures happen because our hypotheses were wrong. I've had plenty of these. Your paper gets submitted to a journal, it gets rejected. That's usually an intelligent failure unless you didn't try very hard. So these are the stepping stones in new territory through which new knowledge and improvement and innovation are developed, but they're not mistakes. So if you do nothing else after this talk, do not use mistake and failure interchangeably. They are two different contexts. A mistake is an unintended deviation from existing knowledge, processes, or rules. A failure is an outcome we don't like so much, right? But we have to learn to love them in new territory. So what this means is we all need a mindset shift, right? As leaders in a VUCA world, we need to know that our job is, some small part, maybe large part, depending on where you work, is helping prevent basic failures. How? Largely by ensuring speaking up, so that people can speak up when they aren't sure about something. They can ask a question. They can point out a mistake, yours especially. And then that is really an important thing for preventing basic failures. And of course, by providing training for people. We also want to anticipate and prevent as many complex failures as humanly possible. How? By ensuring speaking up and by practicing vigilance and teamwork. Right? All of us are smarter than any one of us. And then finally, the new and maybe hardest part about excellence in an uncertain world is that we actually want more, not fewer, intelligent failures. Right? If you think I got through this week with no intelligent failures, that's not necessarily good. Right? That's probably not excellence. So how do you do that? Well, you have to make it safe for people to take smart risks. That means new territory, small, smart, safe, and by celebrating and learning from the results. So in order to have excellence today, psychological safety matters. I think that's understood. But that's not it. That's not the full story, right? That's not the full recipe. The full recipe is we need to, those poor cartoon men, they needed to have a higher quality debate about this highly strategic decision. So even though so much of my research, especially some years ago, was about helping make sure this never happens, right? That someone withholds something important in a conversation or another setting, and that could end up leading to a failure or a lost opportunity. We don't want that to happen because they're just afraid, they worry about how they look. We want this to happen, right? We want people contributing, speaking up. But you can see that's not the whole story. There's two empty cells here. So like it or not, and I guess I do, since it's happening right this moment, sometimes people are quiet, not because they're disengaged, but because they're listening, processing, learning. Right? And that too is part of having a high quality conversation. In fact, it's a crucial part. And then sometimes, like it or not, we have people speaking, but they're speaking in a disruptive way that isn't helping anybody. They're bullying, they're interrupting, you name it. And so high quality conversations for better decisions essentially have this attribute, right? It's a team sport, and everybody there is doing their best to minimize disrupting and withholding and to maximize contributing and processing. Okay, so that's just definition. Here's the rub. There's an asymmetry, right? Disrupting is visible. You all see it when it happens, whereas withholding is invisible. You don't know someone's withholding the keys to the kingdom in that moment. Right? So we have to learn to notice it. Now, high quality conversations, I think they got the orange and not the black here. But let me give you a simple rubric for how do you know if you're having them. And the first attribute is people are contributing and listening. You look around, it seems people are engaged. It seems they're sharing, it seems they're leaning in. Or are they sort of holding back, reading the room? And honestly, for each of the three levels here, these are things you can do. If you think this isn't happening, it is your job to intervene. Right? You have a responsibility to just make it better, and people will appreciate you for it. The second attribute is there's a healthy mix of what my mentor Chris Erders called advocacy and inquiry, which is an academic way of saying statements and questions. But you're listening. Are people asking genuine questions so that they're getting smarter every day? And are they asking genuine questions to prompt candid responses? I'll give you an illustration of that shortly. And then finally, If you're in a high-quality conversation, you have the sense that you're getting somewhere. You're getting smarter. We're getting closer to making a good decision. And so again, the questions on the right are things you can use to self-assess the conversation. Again, if you think it's falling short, intervene. That's your job. It's an invitation. And it will almost always be well received. And it matters because these don't happen by accident. The success depends upon them in a very real way, whether you're at the bedside or in the boardroom. They take leadership, right? They take leadership. Leadership is the force, I like to say, that makes the unnatural happen. So I hope I've already explained that holding back is natural, speaking up is unnatural at work in a hierarchy. I'm going to give you my favorite definition of leadership. There are as many definitions of leadership as there are leaders and people who study leadership like me, but here's my favorite. It came from Ken Frazier, who was the former CEO of Merck, and Ken was in my classroom at HBS 10 years ago and speaking to emerging leaders at his company, and he just happened to define leadership along the way. He said, leadership is the art of harnessing the efforts of others to achieve greatness. I wrote it down. I asked him if I could use it. He said, yes. I love this definition because it's got immense humility. It's essentially saying, I'm not doing it. I'm not in the lab. I'm not even out in the field with customers. My job is to create the conditions where others come to work and are willing and able to devote their efforts to achieving greatness with me. And that's not an easy job, but it is an important job. Now, I'm showing you a CEO here, but any one of us can exercise leadership. You are exercising leadership anytime you're doing something, saying something that makes it easier for others to contribute what they can contribute. So the second question with the ICU study was, what explained the difference? My short answer was leadership at the front line. But here's the toolkit. Here's what those medical directors seemed to do that their counterparts did not. 3 simple things. They routinely framed the work. They proactively invited voice, and they responded thoughtfully, productively. Let me take these one at a time, because these are the things, and you'll have to find a way to do it in your voice, but these are the things that you can do to increase the sense of permission for candor in your organization. So framing the work, that's really reframing the work, because frankly, we all have a frame, right? Frame is the taken for granted views we have of reality. And most of us need to reframe to be a little bit more in line with the VUCA world. So what you can think of it, the sort of, in a sense, the shared goal for nearly everybody is frame the work that lies ahead as a learning challenge, not an execution challenge, meaning it's unlikely to be a simple matter of a to-do list. It's very likely to require problem solving and teamwork and ingenuity and speaking up and experimenting, right? But you gotta call attention to that. I'm gonna give you 3 examples, 3 different contexts. 2 of them are variable, 1 is novel. But here's the first variable one. This is Julie Morath. She was the chief operating officer for a decade at what's now called Children's Minnesota. And she led a very impressive and pioneering patient safety initiative at the hospital. And she would go around to anyone in earshot, reminding them, reframing the work for them. Healthcare, by its very nature, is a complex, error-prone system. 24/7, no 2 patients are alike. Like it or not, things will go wrong. Complex systems have a way of breaking down, right? So she's saying, if you're speaking up about an error, a problem, need for help, you're not finger pointing, which is how these nice people sort of thought about it before. Let me reframe that for you. She says, when you speak up with an error, with a question, you're saving lives. Profound, right? I know it sounds so simple and in a way obvious, but if you're not saying it, you can assume that the default is when something goes wrong, there's a culprit. When something goes wrong, there's someone who screwed up. Let's go find him and punish him. That's not going to work, right? That's not going to produce quality improvement or safety improvement. So she would say until she was forced, I'm just making that part up, to remind people of where we are, and it worked, right? It really profoundly worked. Or what about a complex variable system that got us all here, nearly all of us anyway, which is passenger air travel. So Ben Berman, early in his career, was an aviation safety expert. He was responsible for going through the black box data after a terrible, often fatal crash. And what he found, you may be aware of this, what they found was more often than not, when these airline crashes were happening late 70s, early 80s, it was due to a failure of speaking up in the cockpit crew. Hierarchy. The hierarchy is so profound that it's almost as if you're the junior pilot, your vocal cords don't work. So if you see the pilot doing something wrong, they literally wouldn't say it. And then people would die, right? Which was crazy. So Ben always wanted to be a pilot, and so he finally became one. And then every time he had a new cockpit crew, which is roughly a weekly occurrence in United Airlines, he would open the briefing meeting as follows. I've never flown a perfect flight. And it won't happen today either. I need to hear from you. He's reframing the work from their default, which is, yeah, I've done this 1,000 times, maybe 10,000 times, to nope. Whatever it is we're doing here, it's complex, uncertain, and I'm fallible, right? Ben admitted to me in the interview that it really bothers him that he's never flown a perfect flight, right? But he said, God's honest truth, right? So a humble guy. So you gotta know, I mean, you might think, well, don't they know this? No, they do, but they don't. Intellectually, maybe, emotionally, no. Or Jen Hienstra, a wonderful leading chemistry professor at Washington University, who tells the young students and postdocs in her lab, we're gonna fail all day. And you can tell by the smile on her face that she means it, right? Now, what she's saying is not do sloppy work, right? Not be careless. What she's saying is if you want to be a scientist, you better be willing to fail. Right? If you know in advance it's going to work, that's called high school, meaning in the lab, right? But in a real lab, in a real university, most of the experiments you run will end in failure. Right? So, but guess who comes to a PhD in chemistry? People who've never gotten an A- in their whole life. Right? So she's got to reprogram them. But she's literally got to help them think differently than they did when they got there, or else they won't be any good, right? The lab won't function. So for you, I know this is the hard, this one's the longest to explain, but for you, ask yourself, right? What have I said today? Well, today you're here, but in general, this week, right? What have I said this week to reinforce, this is a short week, I mean, and we're early in the week, so last week, we'll go with last week. What have I said last week to reinforce the message that anyone's voice could make a difference at an unexpected moment in solving a problem or preventing a failure? You gotta say it, don't assume they know it. What have I said today to reinforce the message that things will go wrong in our VUCA world here? We're in the fast recovery business. We're in the learning business, not in the perfect person business. They don't exist. And finally, what have I said to reinforce the message that smart experiments are absolutely essential for our future success? Right? That's where tomorrow will come from. So framing the work is really about, bottom line, it's about giving people an emotional and intellectual understanding, a rationale for why it's genuine that their voice matters. Because otherwise it's like, oh, I've got an open door policy. Nobody's walking in or out. You gotta give them a little more than I want to hear from you. This is why you're saving lives, right? Because I'll miss something. I'll make a mistake. Experiments often end in failure. Second thing, this is pretty straightforward, but still a little bit of fun, and maybe this is where a lot of the low-hanging fruit is. Be proactive, because remember the calculus, the math, if you will? Voice is costly, silence is free. You can turn that upside down. You can make voice nearly free, and you can make silence a little bit costly. It sounds mean, but it's not, right? And how do you do that? Well, pretty simple. You make silence costly. I had an interview earlier with someone. She asked me questions, and Michelle asked me questions. I mean, like, I can't tell you how awkward it would have felt to refuse to answer, right? So you get where I'm going. So you can invite participation by mastering the art of the good question. And a good question is one, it's not, hey, how you doing? I mean, that's fine, right, friendly. But it's one that focuses on some issue, you know, this merger, this project, those customers. By its wording, it invites careful thought, and it gives people room to respond. It's rarely yes, no. So they come in two kinds. Kind one is the kind that helps us go broad. What are we missing, right? So what are we missing? What other options could we consider? How might our competitor think about this? Or my favorite, who has a different approach? Who has a different perspective? Why is that my favorite? Because I can't tell you how many management team meetings I have observed where they're talking about something consequential, and have a conversation, it ends, and the issue leader or team leader says, does anyone have a different view? Crickets, right? What's the frame in that question? Anyone of you brave enough to slow me down? No, good, okay, that's great. What's the frame in this question? One of you has a treasure, I just don't know who. So it's genuinely inviting participation. The other kind, of course, are the kind that go deeper. What leads you to think so? What's the concern you have? How would that work in action? Can you explain that further, right? You are saying, I am genuinely interested in your thinking, and by the way, you are, or you should be, works better if you are. And that invites people to participate. This is so obvious, right? Why even take your valuable time up telling you this? Because of the human challenge. The basic, fundamental human challenge is this. It is hard to learn if you already know. Right? And knowing has a lot more popularity than learning, but more from a neuroscience perspective, we're hardwired and socialized to literally feel like we know. Like I look around right now and I still feel like I see reality. I don't. Right? I see reality filtered through my biases, background, expertise, and so forth. So I don't see reality. I need to train myself to be curious. I need to choose learning over knowing, and I need to help other people choose learning too. Now, another thought about inviting participation, let's go to ancient history. Alfred Sloan, they named the MIT Business School after him, and he wrote a marvelous memoir called My Years at General Motors. Now, Sloan is given credit for transforming GM from a sort of regional auto company to a global powerhouse. A very widely respected 20th century leader. And in his memoirs, he tells this story. Top team, kind of like that cartoon, bunch of white men around the table, and they're talking about acquiring another company. And he says, gentlemen, I take it we're in complete agreement on this decision. You can almost see the smile on Sloan's face, right? Wrong. Check out the rest of the story. He says, well, then I propose we postpone further discussion of this matter until our next meeting. Why? To give ourselves time to develop some disagreement and perhaps gain a deeper understanding of what this decision is all about. Notice that he's essentially saying, he's quite polite, if you guys had been any good, you would have brought some dissent here, right? So this isn't just, hey, dissent is fine. This is, I insist. Now, please don't insist on dissent for what should we have for lunch today. Doesn't matter, right? Just doesn't matter. But when the stakes are high, when the decision is reasonably irreversible, or totally irreversible, have a high-quality conversation. So this is a version of an old matrix, an Eisenhower matrix they call it, where when the importance is high and the uncertainty is high, those are the moments when you have an obligation to dig in with curiosity and care. Those are the moments where a high-quality conversation really matters, where psychological safety really matters, where you need people either contributing or listening, where you need people asking good questions and making deep and thoughtful statements, and where you need to be making progress toward greater clarity. So ask yourself, how many good questions have I asked last week? Have I demonstrated a bias for action while ensuring that concerns can be heard to prevent, preventable failures, low quality bets? Have I ensured dissent for uncertain, important decisions? Okay, we've set the stage. We've framed the work as the kind of work upon which quality is dependent on others' input. We've invited it proactively. We've asked good questions. They've spoken up. Now, how do you respond? Short answer, productively. Again, orientation toward the future, toward learning. Let me give you an example. So, 20 years ago, Alan Mulally, you heard of Alan Mulally? Came in from the outside, from Boeing, to Ford, to become its new CEO. Now, Ford was on life support, not literal, but financial, at that point. They were literally losing that year, 2006, $17 billion. It's like a lot of red ink. Right? And people thought, honestly, they thought it couldn't be done. And who's this guy? And he seems kind of like a Boy Scout and comes in, right? And he tells his team around the table, no longer a bunch of just white men, he says, we will meet every week at this time, and we will work through this. We will turn this place around. And you will bring me your reports. You will bring us your reports, color-coded. So green for all is well, yellow for we've got some concerns, and red for I got a problem, right? So, first 2, 3 meetings, guess what color the reports were? You were there. No, yeah, you were there. Okay, no, yeah, I mean, crazy, right? So finally, I mean, he's patient man, right? Finally, he says, listen, team, we're on track to lose $17 billion. That's a reframe. What isn't going well? Notice that's a good question. Silence until Mark Fields just gingerly raises his hand. He's the head of all of the Americas, North, South, Canada, and he proceeds to tell a very disturbing story about a new vehicle launch, real concerns, flaws, quality problems with this launch, upon which the turnaround strategy very much depends. The room goes blank. And everybody around that table later reports thinking, this is Mark's last day on the job. That's what they had learned. In their long histories at Ford, they had learned if you speak bad news to power, you get fired. Literally, I mean, that's just a stupid way to run a company, but that's apparently what had been happening. So they're waiting for that moment. It doesn't come. What happens instead is Mulally puts his hands together and starts to applaud. They're like, what's this? Someone's going to come from stage left and get Mark and take him out? No, he's applauding. He says, Mark, thank you for that clear line of sight. It's a great line, right? It's not, oh, how wonderful. It's not, like this is bad, but clear line of sight. Thank you for that clear line of sight. Good line, use it. And then, how can I help? Or how can we help? So the recipe here is this. A productive response is appreciative, recognizing your heart and soul is in this, right? And the honesty matters, and forward-looking. Resist the temptation to say, how the heck did that happen? That, by the way, is an important question, and I believe in after-action reviews. But not now. Not this moment. This moment, forward. And forward is, how can I help? Now, my favorite part about this story is, before Mark could say another word, 3 other executives had spoken up. One to say, I've seen that problem with like the actuator on the vehicle. I've seen that somewhere before. And I could look into that and get the information. Someone else then said, Benny Fowler, actually, head of R&D, he said, I have some ideas about how that could be fixed. And then Joe Hinrichs from manufacturing says, I am sending some of my dynamite engineers to that plant for you tomorrow. 12 seconds. Mulally says that conversation took 12 seconds. And now we are literally on the path, right, toward the turnaround, which did ultimately happen. But don't underestimate how hard this is to do in the moment. Because in the moment, all the emotions, all the disappointment, all the frustration, when you hear something you don't like, you must catch yourself. Mulally says, you have to make honest feedback or bad news a positive experience, because it isn't, naturally. I had to demonstrate with my behavior that I welcomed it. Right? I love this. The red is a gem. You know, if all is going well, yeah, I mean, it's supposed to be going well, right? But don't bring good news to a group of smart people who can, in 12 seconds, get you started on the path toward recovery, right? It's really, it's just a reframe for what does good look like. You know, good doesn't look like waste people's time with all the good things you've done. Good looks like, here's a problem I have, can you help? He had to change that. And then it took a while before everybody else started. It turns out they were waiting like a week later, still all green except Mark, because they're kind of like, is he still here? Okay, another week, is he still here? Okay, he's still here. So then Alan says, about 3 or 4 weeks later, he says, guess what color the charts were? Like a rainbow. He says, that was the moment I knew we were going to pull this off. That was the moment. He said, oh, I mean, we got some issues, but we'll pull this off. We're talking to each other. We're having honest conversations. I ask you this. How does it feel when someone points out your error? Let's be honest. Most of us don't love it. Certainly, I don't. Right? Doesn't feel good. So then I ask, is it possible to learn a new response? Dr. Jonathan Cohen, anesthesiologist here in Florida and Moffitt Cancer Center, says yes. And he posted this wonderful PowerPoint where he says, actually, it feels pretty good. Now, he's an honest guy, and he says, I'll be clear with you, it didn't always feel that way. But I trained myself, he says. I trained myself to equate someone pointing out my error with patients getting safer care. Like, if I can connect those two things in my brain, think about what the equivalent might be for you, then I can like it. I can train my brain to like it. And then in the fine print here, he says somewhere, it also means I'm doing something right. And he's right, so he shouldn't take credit for it. It means I'm a good leader in the OR. So ask yourself, how do I respond to bad news? What's my face doing? How do I respond when someone points out my error? Do I welcome intelligent failure? Do I help people learn from mistakes and basic failures as well? But let's tie this all together. Leaders, that word refers to a role, Ken Fraser, others. But leadership is a behavior. Leadership is a force. It's a force that we can all tap into that helps others bring their best selves forward, right? And so the kind of leadership that builds a fearless organization, a psychologically safe, engaged, high-powered organization is essentially reframing the work, call attention to attributes of the work that require learning, teaming, speaking up, that invites participation, proactively leaning into inquiry, setting up structures and processes, color code, whatever you want, just make it easier, lower the threshold, and finally, responding in a way that expresses appreciation, destigmatizes failure of all kinds, welcomes smart failure, and importantly, I didn't say much about this today, but it is true that you also want to sanction clear violations. You know, when people are bullying, when people are doing things that are unhelpful, they need your help as well. Right? They need your feedback as well. Now, in case you can't remember all this, I'll just give you 3 stances for each. Right? So framing the work, inviting engagement, responding productively. You don't have to remember to frame the work if you can remember to just show up with humility. If you show up with humility, you'll naturally start talking about aspects of the work that are complex, uncertain, novel. We've never done this before. I'm going to need your help. We've never flown a perfect flight. Right? It won't happen today either. I sure wish it would. So, you know, just show up with a little humility. That doesn't mean false modesty, right? That just means recognition that you today are leading in a VUCA world without a crystal ball. You better be humble or bad things happen. Number 2, show up with curiosity. Re-engage that part of yourself that's curious. That part of yourself that wants to actively choose learning over knowing. And then finally, empathy, right? Not sympathy, empathy. Can you feel what it would be like to be in their shoes and respond the way it would help you, if you were in their shoes, do the best possible job? That's that is essentially the formula, I would say, for building psychological safety and helping people really team up and build a fearless organization together. So in an uncertain world, the most important thing is we change our thinking so that our behavior changes to enable the things that have to happen that are really hard to happen. So I will end with, and then be thinking of your questions, my recipe for excellence. Yes, there is one. There is a recipe for excellence in an uncertain world. You didn't know, because usually you need recipes only in the consistent context, but guess what? There is one. And the first step in the process is aim high. I suspect that just the very fact of all of you being here shows that you are willing to do this. This is go for ambitious goals that are currently just out of reach. And if you're going for ambitious goals with your team, your organization, you better team up. And you're going to have to team up with people who are different from you, who bring different perspectives, expertise, and ideas, so that you can team up and pursue something that hasn't been done before. And if you team up with people who are different from you, pursuing ambitious goals, guess what? You'll fail. So fail well. What does that mean? That means do everything in your power to prevent basic and complex failures, and pursue and increase the frequency of intelligent failures. And step 4, learn fast. Failures are no good at all if you don't learn from them. And oh, how I would love to stop there, but I cannot. There's a 5th step, and it would be dishonest not to share it. Repeat, right? The cycle never stops. It will be aim high, team up, learn fast, fail well, learn fast, repeat from now forward. What questions do you have? We have mics, and I know I've been unclear at least 6 times, and I know I've left stuff out. So bring your questions forward so we can make sense of them together right here.